Notre Dame just took a big hit as star offensive lineman Charles Jagusah fractured his arm in a UTV accident, raising questions about the offensive line heading into 2025. But it wasn't all bad news. Over the weekend, the Irish kept off a recruiting trifecta, landing wide receivers Caden Finley, Devin Fitzgerald, and Brayden Robinson, three playmakers who could shape the future of the Irish offense. We have got a lot to cover on today's show, and it starts right now.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into another edition of Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Wojciak. I'm a Notre Dame alum, producer at Fox Sports, and I've been covering the Irish for the past 5 years. I hope you had an excellent 4th of July weekend with friends and family, and I am pumped to be back with you here on Tuesday, July 8th. Thanks as always for making this your first watch or listen of the day. I'd really appreciate it if you took a second to subscribe to the YouTube channel or follow on your preferred podcast app. I also wanted to let you know that we're going to be doing another Friday mailbag this week, so submit your questions if you want to be featured on the show. You can drop yours in the YouTube comments if you're watching along, or you can tweet them to me at Locked On Irish or DM the Instagram account at Locked On Irish Pod. It was a very eventful weekend for Notre Dame. Some of it was good, some of it was bad, and we have got a jam-packed show to break it all down. The bad news is Notre Dame star right guard Charles Jagusah suffered a serious injury in a UTV accident. I'm going to explain what we know, how it impacts the Irish offense heading into 2025, and what this means for Jagusah's future after yet another tough setback. Then we're going to flip to the good news. Marcus Freeman and his staff landed two more high-upside wide receivers in the class of 2026, Devin Fitzgerald, the son of NFL legend Larry Fitzgerald, and Texas speedster Brayden Robinson. That brings the total number of receiver commits in this class to 5, coming just after Caden Finley's commitment on the 4th. I love this group, and I'm going to tell you why in segments 2 and 3. But let's kick things off with the biggest story impacting the 2025 season. So here's what we know right now about Charles Jagusah's injury. Rumors started to surface Saturday evening that Jagusah may have been injured, and Notre Dame confirmed that with a statement. Here's the exact quote. Sophomore offensive lineman Charles Jagusah was injured in a UTV accident in Wyoming on July 5th. He has undergone surgery to repair a fracture of his left humerus. The initial prognosis is favorable, and he will return to campus earlier this week for further evaluation and continued care, end quote. A fractured humerus is a break in the upper arm bone, and that is all we have that we know for certain at this point in time. That is what Notre Dame has released. But since that time, John Bryce from Football Scoop and Irish Illustrated, as well as Matt Freeman from Irish Daily, have reported that Jagusah was in Wyoming with around 10 teammates at Luke Talich's family ranch celebrating the 4th of July. The group was engaging in all sorts of outdoor activities. They were shooting some guns with local law enforcement and riding UTVs. And considering law enforcement was on the scene, I don't think that they were doing any intense partying that led to these bad decisions. I think that it was just an unfortunate accident. Jagusah was driving a UTV, allegedly with his arm outside the vehicle when it rolled, which is what led to the fracture. He then had surgery that night and is returning to campus for further evaluation. There was some initial concern about some potential ligament damage, but early reports say any triceps involvement is minimal. The best case timeline, according to John Bryce, is a potential return by late September, though that could change with rehab. I am not optimistic that he is going to return anytime sooner than that, but obviously if he's able to participate by, let's say, early October, that is a great sign for Notre Dame. So that is what we know, okay? I feel comfortable reporting that from John Bryce and Matt Freeman because their reports are consistent with one another, and they both went public with that on Monday. So what does this mean for the team? Well, we learned last season that no one injury is fatal to a season, and Jagusah has just 2 career starts and has played in 116 snaps, so it's not like this one loss wipes out their chances at a national championship or anything like that, but it is a significant loss. I ranked him number 3 on the team in my top 5 players on the roster heading into 2025 when I did my Top 5 Friday on a Wednesday of last week, and I truly believe he is the best offensive lineman on the roster and potentially one of the best guards in the entire country. So now Without Charles Jagusah in the mix, I believe that it lowers Notre Dame's offensive ceiling, especially early on against Miami, Florida in the season opener, and then Texas A&M in the home opener. But still, I wouldn't go so far as saying Notre Dame should now be underdogs in either one of those games. I expect Notre Dame to win against Miami. I expect them to beat Texas A&M, but it's going to be harder now that they don't have Charles Jagusah on the offensive line for this game. So Notre Dame has several different options that they can go with here to replace Jagusah. I think the most likely one is just move Sullivan Absher to right guard and have him start there because he has elite size. He's 6'8", 328 pounds. He's been in the system for 2 years already, and he was already getting reps with the ones during spring practice, albeit at center, as he was filling in for Ashton Craig while Craig recovers from his injury. Notre Dame has been really high on Sullivan Absher for a long time. His career has kind of been all over the place. He started at tackle, then they moved him to guard last year, and then he started getting some reps at center in place of Ashton Craig, but he was considered the 6th offensive lineman on the team going into the start of the year. This is why he decided to come back to Notre Dame instead of entering the transfer portal, and now Sullivan Absher has a chance to earn that starting job in fall camp at right guard as opposed to center. But I think that is the most likely option, but that is not the only option Notre Dame has to replace him. They could also move Anthony Knapp from left tackle to right guard, and then that could open up the left tackle spot for Gerby Lambert or true freshman Will Black. Gerby Lambert is still recovering from a torn labrum injury that he suffered in spring practice, but he is expected to be practicing for fall camp. We don't know if he's going to be 100% or anything close to that, but he is expected to be out there with the team. The question is, could Gerby Lambert be ready for week 1, or is he going to be healthy enough in practice to win a job on the starting offensive line? Meanwhile, Will Black, who is a very highly coveted recruit, has a ton of potential at Notre Dame. I think he has a super high ceiling, could end up being a first-round NFL draft pick down the line. He is still a true freshman who hasn't even practiced yet. That is not an ideal scenario, especially at left tackle. And also, Joe Rudolph really likes Anthony Knapp at left tackle. He made that clear during the spring. That's a big reason why Charles Jagusah ended up moving from left tackle, which is where he was expected to start last season, over to right guard. So I think that complicates the move. I know a lot of people just assume that Will Black is going to come on campus and take the world by storm, but it's also important to point out that even though we have seen more true freshmen start in the offensive line, like Anthony Knapp last season, like Joe Alt did in 2021 when he started about halfway through the season at left tackle, and Blake Fisher, who actually started at left tackle at the start of the 2021 season, there is one consistent thing for all three of those guys. They were all early enrollees. Blake Fisher, Joe Alt, Anthony Knapp. Will Black is not an early enrollee. He joined the team in the summer. He has not had an official college practice yet. And I think that when you think about Will Black starting at left tackle, think back to last year. Most people going into the year would, if you had told them one true freshman is going to start at left tackle, pretty much everyone would have said Gerby Lambert because he was the high 4-star recruit coming out of high school. He had all the potential in the world, but it was actually Anthony Knapp, and Knapp made a significant move during spring practice. Will Black hasn't done that yet. Maybe he could still do it, but that is a big reason why I think that option is unlikely. Option 3 could involve Chris Tarek or Joe Otting starting at right guard. If this is up to Joe Rudolph and he decides he doesn't want to shuffle any of these guys around, he wants to keep Anthony Knapp left tackle, he wants to keep Sullivan Absher at center, then technically Chris Tarek is the next man up. Otting could move to guard full time and compete because he is and has been a center at Notre Dame for the past 2 seasons, but if Notre Dame elects to go with Ashton Craig and Sullivan Absher at that position, maybe it makes sense to move Joe Otting to right guard. This is less likely, but not impossible. And as we know, Joe Rudolph has surprised us before, so I'm not counting out either one of these guys to start. I think the 4th option would be move Gerby Lambert to right guard. This is pretty doubtful, especially with his recovery and the current cross-training that he's been doing at both the tackle spots. He was playing left tackle and right tackle during spring practice. So now if you want to add another position to his plate coming off an injury, that seems like a stretch to me, but it could be an option if Gerby Lambert proves to be one of the 5 best and Knapp stays put. So they have a bunch of different options. I ultimately think they're going to go with Sullivan Absher at the starting right guard in week 1, but we have a lot of time until then, and I'm sure the coaching staff is going to mix and match the offensive line a ton during fall camp, or at least the first 8 practices, to figure out who the best 5 guys are and figure out where they fit. Bigger picture here, a lot of this is going to come down to how Marcus Freeman handles this as the leader of this program. Like, what kind of message does he send to the locker room about Charles Jagusah's injury? Because that was a really tough blow for the team, and the fact that it happened off the field makes it a more bitter pill to swallow, and he could end up with a situation where the fill-in, let's say it's Sullivan Absher, plays well early on in the season. Notre Dame is rolling at the start of the year. They could be starting off 3-0, 4-0, or maybe 4-1, and then by the time Charles Jagusah is back and healthy, is Marcus Freeman going to be ready to insert him back in the lineup immediately when the other guy who didn't make a poor decision, who forced himself off the field, is out there playing well? Like, we don't know the answer yet right now, but that is definitely something I'm going to be monitoring as the situation continues to develop here over the course of the next few weeks. It's also on the players to step up here and basically hold everyone accountable for what happened, because there were a bunch of other players there. It could have happened to any one of those guys, and now it's going to reveal a lot about not just the staff's philosophy, but also the team's ability to lead and hold each other accountable. Last note on Charles Jagusah for today's show and what it means for him. I mean, look, this is his third major surgery since he committed to Notre Dame in high school. He had shoulder surgery before his freshman year of college. Then he tore his pec during fall camp in 2024. And then he just had surgery to repair a fractured arm from this UTV accident. No one is questioning Charles Jagusah's ability. He's an incredibly gifted player with enormous potential. But at some point, availability becomes part of the evaluation, and he just has not been able to stay on the field. That's not entirely his fault. Injuries are often out of your control, but the reality is he's starting to resemble the arc of Kevin Austin's career. Like Jagusah, Austin was a big-time recruit, and he was clearly a special talent that was recognizable right away from the moment he stepped on campus. Austin flashed early on in his career, but then he missed the entire 2019 season due to a suspension, and then he missed most of 2020 with a foot injury. In 2021, his senior year, he finally played a full season and had the best year for a Notre Dame wide receiver since Chase Claypool. But then after that year, he could have come back to Notre Dame in 2022, but he declared for the NFL draft when undrafted in his career is now mostly remembered for what could have been. Jagusah still has plenty of time to write a different story, and getting injured in an off-the-field accident is different than being suspended for a season due to a violation of team rules. And he could absolutely come back and have a great career. But right now, it's all it is. It's potential. We have not seen it materialize yet. All that said, though, I do truly feel for Charles Jagusah. This was an accident, and I'm sure he's absolutely devastated. I understand why fans are upset. You know, when a player gets hurt doing something risky in the offseason, especially one with a history of injuries, it's frustrating. I get that, right? But some of the criticism I've seen has gone a little too far, in my opinion. Yes, players are treated differently now because of NIL, and I get the argument that there should be consequences tied to availability. If there is a clause in his NIL deal, he might lose some earnings, and I think that's fair. Actions have consequences. But the idea that Notre Dame should completely cut him off from NIL is a little extreme, in my view. I have certainly made some dumb decisions in my life, especially when I was in college. The difference is I didn't have as much on the line like Charles Jagusah, but even now, if I tore up my knee on a ski trip and I missed time at work, I'd hope my employer would show some grace and let me work my way back. That's just my perspective. If you feel differently, that's fine, but I'm trying to keep some perspective and some empathy as it relates to Charles Jagusah in this situation. Like, what's the saying? Let he who is without sin cast first stone. I believe that applies here. It is an incredibly unfortunate situation for Charles Jagusah, the offensive line in this Notre Dame team, but I don't think that it's something that they won't be able to come back from, and I think we all wish a speedy recovery for Charles Jagusah. All right, now let's shift gears to some much-needed good news. Marcus Freeman and his staff just landed a big-name wide receiver with a Hall of Fame bloodline and plenty of potential. Coming up next, we're breaking down the commitment of four-star wide receiver Devin Fitzgerald. Stick around. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Have you ever decided at the last minute to head to a ball game with friends or family? Maybe it's game day and you suddenly realize you want to be in the stands. That's exactly where Game Time comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last-minute tickets without the stress. With the money you save on tickets, you can splurge on food, drinks, merch, or even invite a bigger group to come with you. Game Time makes it possible. Game Time makes buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app actually drop the closer you get to first pitch, and they've got incredible last-minute deals, clear seat views, and a lowest price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying. My favorite part is you can see the view from your seat in the app before you buy, so you know exactly where you're going to be sitting. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. It's no secret to Notre Dame fans that Marcus Freeman has had major success recruiting the sons of former NFL players, but the rest of the country seems to be catching on after the Irish landed commitment from Devin Fitzgerald, the son of NFL legend Larry Fitzgerald, arguably one of the greatest wide receivers of all time. Actually, I don't think it's arguable that he's one of the greatest receivers of all time, but I think that he has a case to be considered the greatest receiver to ever play the game of football. Devin does not come with his dad's pedigree, but he's still a very talented prospect. He's a 3-star wide receiver from Brophy College Prep in Phoenix, Arizona, and he is a big body wide receiver who can play the boundary at Notre Dame. He's listed as 6'2", 205 pounds, and he's ranked as the number 72 wide receiver in the class and the number 454 player overall. Fitzgerald's stock really started to rise after a breakout junior season when he racked up 52 catches for 720 yards and 9 touchdowns. Notre Dame has been recruiting him, though, since his freshman year of high school, but they waited until May of this year to offer him a scholarship. This has been a long process, but then once Fitzgerald got the offer, he scheduled his official visit for June 13th, the big recruiting weekend that we have talked about so much on the show. And stop me if you've heard this before. Marcus Freeman and the Notre Dame coaching staff made a great impression on Devin Fitzgerald and his family, and ultimately that was enough to seal the deal. Fitzgerald's final 3 schools were Notre Dame, UCLA, and Stanford. Clemson was in the mix there for a little bit, but then it really came down to Notre Dame and UCLA, and Notre Dame won out because of that official visit weekend. They were able to close on him, and after that weekend, Devin Fitzgerald canceled an official visit to North Carolina, and the writing was on the wall that Fitzgerald was going to be a part of this class of 2026. Devin ended up telling Eli Letterman of ESPN that he's actually known Notre Dame wide receiver coach Mike Brown since he was 5 years old, and Mike Brown was instrumental in this recruitment. He has taken a lot of heat in the past for his inability to land the big-time wide receiver prospects, but Mike Brown has got things rolling right now for Notre Dame recruiting at the wide receiver position. Fitzgerald was the 4th wide receiver to commit. Brayden Robinson ended up being the 5th, and this was a huge class for him. It was very, very important that Notre Dame landed multiple big-time wide receivers with plenty of upside, and that's exactly what Mike Brown has been able to do, so he deserves a ton of praise for what he's been able to do in this class. And not only did Notre Dame need to add big-time talent, they needed to add a boundary receiver, and that's exactly what Devin Fitzgerald can provide for this team. He has the ideal size for the position. He's listed at 6'2", 205 pounds, but he plays even bigger, and he has grown significantly since he was in high school. He was a late bloomer, and look, I can relate to that. When I was in high school, not joking, my first day of freshman year, I was 5'2", 105, and I played freshman football. I think the first day of practice, they looked at me and thought I was insane, and maybe they considered calling child services. Thank God they didn't. I ended up growing a little bit over the next 4 years, but Devin Fitzgerald is in a similar boat, although I don't think he was 5'2", 105 at the start of freshman year. But now he's up to 6'2", 205, and I think that he's actually going to grow a couple more inches by the time he steps foot on campus. Like his dad, he has really strong hands and excellent body control, especially in contested catch situations. I think you can teach hands if you just get enough reps and you have big enough hands. You're going to be good at catching the ball so long as you focus when you're actually running the route. But I really think that body control is kind of a God-given thing. Yes, you can practice it, you can improve it, but if you want to get really, really good at it, part of it is just God-given, and Devin Fitzgerald certainly has that. He's not necessarily a burner, but he's deceptively fast. He doesn't look like he's running all that hard, and yet none of those guys can catch him. So he kind of runs like a gazelle. He's got really long strides, and even though it doesn't look like he's exerting a lot of effort, if no one can catch him, who really cares? So I do think that he might not have the elite athleticism that some of the 5-star guys have. He has enough that he's going to be able to run away from guys at the college level. He's a polished route runner with a really high football IQ. No surprise given his pedigree. And he may not be elite at one specific thing, but he's so technically sound, I think he's going to be able to thrive at the college level. He's probably not going to see like a ton of playing time as a true freshman, but I fully expect him to become a major contributor by his junior year. When you have a dad like Larry Fitzgerald, you're just going to be born in a different environment. You're going to understand the nuances of playing wide receiver. You're going to have a really high football IQ. And let's be honest, he's probably getting some of the best training that you can get as a wide receiver at the high school level. I think that's the case with Devin Fitzgerald, and I think that's a big reason why he was able to make such a big jump in his game from his sophomore to his junior season. If he's able to do the same from his junior to his senior year, then he's really going to rise up the recruiting rankings. If he mirrors anything close to Bryce Young's high school trajectory, then you could be looking at a really big-time prospect by the time this is all said and done. Because if you remember, Bryce Young at one point in time was just a 3-star who was a really tall, skinny kid with a great name. That was kind of what Devin Fitzgerald was. I don't think he's as skinny, but he's also been improving so much year to year that it's not that crazy to think that Devin Fitzgerald could end up becoming like a high 4-star prospect at the end of the 2026 cycle. Not only is he developing as a player, he also is a strong fit for Notre Dame's culture. His character and his work ethic should help him reach his ceiling. And now Devin joins Thomas Davis Jr. and Kaden Finley as sons of former NFL stars in Notre Dame's class of 2026. And then once he gets on campus, he's going to join a wide receiver room that also includes the sons of Plaxico Burress and Elijah Burress and Jerome Bettis Jr. Clearly, Marcus Freeman's message resonates with NFL veterans. They trust him to develop their sons. And this is not new, right? Jordan Clark, the son of Ryan Clark, transferred to Notre Dame from Arizona to play out his final season of college football. It was cool to see Ryan Clark in the stands. Also, Notre Dame was able to recruit Kennedy Urlacher, the son of Brian Urlacher, out of high school. And even though Kennedy ended up transferring to USC, it's yet another example of a big-time former NFL player who trusted Marcus Freeman in the recruiting stage. There's also been other instances, like Notre Dame had Ivan Taylor committed at one point last cycle, the son of Ike Taylor. So if you look around, you can see it, right? All these former NFL players, they come to campus. They see what Notre Dame has to offer, not just on the football field, but off the field. They understand the importance of life after football, and that is a big talking point for Notre Dame. That's something that they stress. It's something that separates them from the other great teams in college football. But what had been holding Notre Dame back is their ability to compete on the football field with those other elite teams. But coming off that run to the national championship, when Notre Dame was on the doorstep of ending that title drought, I think that sends another message to all these former players that it's not just about preparing their kid for the life after football, it's about maximizing their experience playing the game while they can. And Notre Dame presents a very unique opportunity for all of these players, but specifically the ones who have been raised in NFL families. So the fact that all of these different former NFL players are trusting Marcus Freeman and this Notre Dame program to maximize their son's playing ability and then set them up for success later on in life, like that is extremely high praise for a head coach entering his 4th season. I mean, it feels like Marcus Freeman has been around for a really long time, but he's only completed 3 seasons. He's going into his 4th year, and that is a message the rest of college football should really be paying attention to. All right, and just when you thought that was it, Notre Dame added even more firepower at wide receiver. Brayden Robinson brings something this class desperately needed: speed, and a whole lot of it. I'm going to break down his game and where things could be headed next for the class of 2026 right after this. So Kaden Finley got the good news rolling on the 4th of July when he made his commitment to Notre Dame official. Then Devin Fitzgerald followed suit on Saturday, and Brayden Robinson capped it off on Sunday when he became the 3rd wide receiver to commit to Notre Dame over the weekend and the 5th wide receiver overall to commit to Notre Dame in the class of 2026. And he caps off one of the best classes at the position in a long, long time. Now, Brayden Robinson's recruiting profile is pretty unique. He's not the biggest guy, to say the least. He's listed as 5'8", 160 pounds, but he plays football for Red Oak High School in Texas at the 5A level, so he's going up against some big-time competition, and he has been really, really productive. He is ranked number 52 among wide receivers in his class and number 340 overall, and he was actually planning on announcing his commitment on July 20th, but he moved it up 2 weeks following his official visit on June 13th. Once he made that decision to move his commitment date up from July 20th to July 6th, felt like the writing was on the wall for him to become a member of this class and follow Kaden Finley and Devin Fitzgerald for a trifecta at the wide receiver position. The reason he intended to announce on July 20th is because it's his mom's birthday, but it felt like Notre Dame kind of pressed him a little bit to make this one big grand weekend for the wide receiver position, cap off the class in a big way. And Robinson picked Notre Dame over Miami and Arizona, but he also had a bunch of other offers, and even Ohio State was in the running at one point. And I remember when I was first doing a deep dive into Brayden Robinson, his recruiting profile and all that stuff, I noticed that Ohio State was in the mix. They were one of his favorites, and I thought, that doesn't really bode well for Notre Dame, because if Ohio State really wants a receiver, more often than not, they're going to land that player. And I think Ohio State moved off him a little bit later on in the process. But the fact that Brian Hartline even considered him a take in this class is pretty telling. He is a very talented prospect. But I'm not going to lie, after that big official visit weekend on June 13th through the 15th, I wasn't sure if Brayden Robinson was going to have a spot in this class for Notre Dame if he didn't commit soon, because the spots were filling up fast. They already had Bubba Frazier and Dylan Faison, and then after that weekend, it looked like they were in great shape with Kaden Finley and Devin Fitzgerald, and you're looking at that group and you're thinking, man, even though this is a big need for Notre Dame in this class, 4 wide receivers is a lot. Are they going to be willing to take 5? But once it became clear that this Notre Dame coaching staff was going to be willing to take 5 wide receivers in this class, as long as Robinson would decide sooner rather than later, you knew Robinson was going to be that 5th guy and join this class and cap off a really great group of wide receivers. Notre Dame is getting a gifted football player with elite speed. Sometime you got guys who are track runners, they play football, and they really excel at the high school level, but their game doesn't translate that well to college because they can't just out-athlete everyone the same way. Now, the difference is Brayden Robinson is going up against really good football competition in Texas, especially at the 5A level, so he's already had a chance to prove himself as a football player, and he's been very productive. He has elite straight-line speed, which makes him a threat in the vertical passing game, but he also has incredibly quick feet, which makes him a lethal route runner. When the ball is thrown his way, he's sure-handed and has great football instincts with the ball in his hand. Like, he is awesome to watch after the catch. That's my favorite part of watching him in his highlight tapes. Once he gets to the ball, look out. He can take the ball on a jet sweep, even a handoff, or he can take the ball on a screenplay and take it to the house every single time. But he's even better as a return man. Like, he catches the ball on a punt or a kickoff return, he could take it to the house at any moment. I'm not going to say he's the next Rocket, because Rocket is obviously in a tier of his own, but when you watch Brayden Robinson play in high school, there are certainly flashes that will remind you, well, not remind me, because I wasn't alive to watch Rocket when he was at Notre Dame, but trust me, my dad loved him. I've seen all the highlights. I know how good of a player Rocket was when he was at Notre Dame. But like Rocket, Brayden Robinson is going to have to get a lot stronger once he gets to college, because the Rocket was great as a true freshman. Then he ended up getting a lot better as he continued to put on strength and weight and all that stuff. Then he became even more difficult to tackle. Robinson has to get stronger, because even though he's really, really fast, he's going to have to get bigger so that he can break more tackles and not go down as easily if a defender gets his hands on him, because even though it's difficult for these high school kids to bring him down, big-time college players, especially linebackers, like, they're strong enough where if they get a hand on a guy who is undersized as Robinson, that's going to knock him down. He actually kind of reminds me of a young Chris Tyree. Like, Tyree was blazing fast when he got to Notre Dame, and I know that Tyree was a running back when he started, but when Tyree got the ball in the open field, he could take it to the house. He was getting some carries as a true freshman and had big playability from the moment he stepped on campus. But I felt like Chris Tyree would go down easily whenever he was in traffic, and Tyree didn't make the transition to wide receiver until later on in his career when he was a senior. So Robinson already has a head start on Tyree in that regard. He's also going to enroll early, which is going to give him a chance to play early as a return man, but I think he's probably going to need a year or two to develop into a true slot receiver at the college level. Also, Notre Dame has a bunch of slot receivers on the roster right now. They've got Bubba Frazier in this class. They've also got Logan Soldate, who hasn't really made a dent on Saturdays yet, but Mike Denbrock really likes him. And you've got other wide receivers, and Notre Dame has been willing to bring grad transfer wide receivers as well. So he's going to have to develop into a true, well-rounded slot receiver in high school, but I do think that, he's going to have to do that once he gets to college, but I do believe he's capable of doing that based on what he has shown on the football field in high school. He's also able to generate a ton of separation against the guys he's going up against because of his quickness, but that's not going to be as easy once he gets to college, so he's going to have to improve at route running. He's going to have to improve at all the little nuances, the tricks of the trade of playing wide receiver, anything to gain that little extra inch when you're going up against a really talented defensive back, because all these guys are great athletes once you get to the college game. So it's going to take a little bit of time for Brayden Robinson to develop as a receiver, but I'm telling you, when he gets the ball in his hands, look out. He is just that talented. So it would not surprise me at all if he's the kickoff returner or punt return guy as soon as he starts his college career as a true freshman. So now, with Robinson's commitment, he becomes the 25th verbal commitment in the class of 2026 for Notre Dame, and the 5th at wide receiver, along with the 4 Fs: Finley, Fitzgerald, Faison, and Frazier. But even though Finley is like the headliner in the wide receiver room, and adding Fitzgerald has been a nice boost in terms of the name recognition, I think what Robinson brings to this group with his speed is just another dynamic piece, and it gives them more depth and more speed at wide receiver in one class than they've had in a really long time. Like, I'm so happy to talk about this wide receiver class as a strength of the group as a whole, as opposed to, well, it's November and Notre Dame is still trying to figure out who they're taking, and they got to offer Scrap Richardson. And this is no offense to Scrap, but he had never even played wide receiver before. He was just a good athlete at quarterback in South Florida. And they're like, well, maybe we can turn him into a wide receiver. That is not the case with any of the guys in this group. They're all very talented. They all have high ceilings. And are all 5 of them going to hit at Notre Dame? Probably not, right? But the more talented players you bring in, the more guys who are likely to hit. And that's what they have needed for a long time. So there are 2 more guys left on the board in the class of 2026 as we sit here today. Defensive back Nicholas Reddish, who's going to announce his commitment on Friday, July 11th, and then defensive lineman Elijah Golden, who's going to make his announcement on July 26th. Notre Dame is in pole position for both. I would be surprised if they don't land both of these guys. And if and when they do land them, that will give them 27 commitments in this class, the most since 2021. And assuming that's all they take, they might be open to taking another linebacker or another interior defensive lineman if a player really rises up the recruiting rankings during his senior year. Either way, this is going to go down as the best class for the Irish in over a decade, potentially decades. I believe that they are going to finish in the top 5 at all the recruiting rankings, and specifically at wide receiver. I think this could end up being the best group of wide receivers to commit to Notre Dame in my lifetime. So we started off with some really bad news about Charles Jagusah and his injury. As unfortunate as that is, it wasn't all bad news for Notre Dame over the weekend. Adding players like Devin Fitzgerald and Brayden Robinson is critical for the future of this Irish offense. All right, that is going to do it for me today. Thanks again for making Locked On Irish your first watch or listen of the day. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a rating and review wherever you get your podcasts. Remember, I'm going to be doing another Friday mailbag episode this week, so submit your questions now in the YouTube comments or hit me up on social. The X account is @LockedOnIrish. The Instagram is @LockedOnIrishPod. I'm going to be right back here tomorrow with Tim Murray from VSiN, great friend of the program. It's been a long time since he's been back on the show. We're going to talk Charles Jagusah. We're going to talk Notre Dame win totals, betting angles, and a whole lot more as we gear up for the 2025 season. I'll see you then.